It's a pleasure to be here and an honor. And we as ICCO, as NGO, are excited by this development and the way that we are discussing human rights today. And I will try and give a bit of a perspective from the NGO side. But obviously, this is an important dialogue. And who would have thought 5 to 10 years ago that we would be discussing this in this way? I think that the central, if you want a small summary uphand, then the central thing that I would like to express and emphasize is including affected stakeholders. That is a very key element also to our work. Just one slide about ICCO. ICCO is an organization that started 47 years ago to fight poverty and injustice. And we work with partner organizations in many of the countries in the south. And I think one of the most major changes that we have gone through is that most of our staff no longer work in the Netherlands and most of our staff are no longer Dutch. So over the past 3 to 4 years, we have created 7 regional offices and we have an infrastructure in the Americas, Africa and Asia. So 2 important interventions for ICCO as an organization have been about justice, about human rights, right from the very beginning in '64. And we've, amongst other things, we've worked on fair economic development. And in the past, since about 2005, we've done that with companies also. So we have experience in that field. And if you were to characterize what type of economic development programs we do with our partners, it's often at the very end of the value chain. So it's producers, organizing producers to become cooperatives or to become market forces and to be a player in that field. And what we're now seeing is that there's a combination. These 2 themes of human rights and fair economic development are coming together. And they influence each other very strongly. And I think this is why I said it's also a very positive development that we see Ruggie now, we see a dialogue. And sometimes companies can help to solve human rights issues. And sometimes civil society organizations help companies to become aware. And I'm looking forward to the report that we'll be receiving later on. Take a closer look, because there's still a world to win with what companies are doing now and what the ideal situation for the people that they work with. And I think I agree with Professor Ijsbouts that it's extremely important that CSR is part of the DNA of companies and not just something on the outside. Okay, if we're looking at the main issues that we as an NGO would like to identify as human rights issues, apart from labor rights, there's 5 I would like to mention. The position of indigenous people, and I will highlight that a little bit more in just a minute. It also refers to the film that we saw right at the beginning. Conflict-affected areas, example like Congo, difficult, very difficult area to work. Something that is topical right across the continents is the whole discussion about land and land grabbing. Gender equality, very important, and access to natural resources. So apart from land, water, other natural resources, and the competition on these natural resources. Now just to sort of give an example, this is based on the little film that we just saw. There are a lot of people, indigenous people around the world, 370 million. And their rights are recognized in the UN declaration under UNDRIP 2007. And their position, the indigenous people, is increasingly under pressure because they often live on lands that are particularly rich in minerals and natural resources. And many of these decisions, like mining in Peru, it's taken at a national level, and their decision-making influence is extremely weak because they are often far away and less organized. So the effect is that it creates conflict, forced displacement sometimes, environmental damage, and increased poverty. So it's a very important thing to look at. And that is why, according to this UN Charter, it's important that companies are aware that indigenous people have a right to free, prior, and informed consent, the FPIC. And that is a key principle also in international law. And I think that is why I'm emphasizing this stakeholder involvement. I think that is only possible through stakeholder involvement. So if you look at the different actors that are involved, obviously the state, the companies, communities, and civil society organizations, then you find that the link between companies and communities is often difficult. Companies are often active at a first-tier supplier level, and communities are often right at the end of the value chain or the grassroots level. And so we see an important role also to involve civil society organizations as a linking pin. So what do civil society organizations do? They can play a role in ensuring that problems that are there can be discussed, bring parties to the table, create multi-stakeholder dialogue, and make governments aware of the problems that are being faced by communities. Civil society organizations can also mediate in a certain way and propose solutions for conflicts and lobby local law if necessary. But the important thing is, and I think that's also, I'll come to that also with the due diligence, is to do this in a mode that it is preventive, that it starts early, and that you don't let it run up to a time and a situation that a conflict is already there. So it's important that these principles are looked at a very early stage when new initiatives are being taken. Now, if we look at the due diligence as part of the Ruggie framework, human rights policy, and we call previous consult, it's very important that we are early on, as I've already stressed, impact assessment, which can be done through in-depth country or commodity study, integration, so that if there are problems, there can be corrective actions taken through a plan, tracking performance, also involving the community, communication, fact-finding, and what was already mentioned, also a grievance mechanism involving local civil society partners. And this, then you can see that there's an intervention of being aware, being early, preventing adverse consequences for stakeholders, and then mitigation if necessary. But obviously, I'm trying to emphasize that the earlier you deal with these situations, the better it is. So that, in a nutshell, Chair, is the response from civil societies and NGOs. And I thank you for your attention. We'll be active in workshop 4 if you have further interest. And obviously we work closely with the Fair Wear Foundation and the Social Accountability International, who are also represented in the workshops. Thank you.